Prieteni, s-a întâmplat. De azi înainte, Avdiivka trăiește în sufletele noastre și sub cizma rușilor. Asta este, pentru cei care nu știu, Avdiivka era un oraș fortificat, un fel de suburbie a orașului Donetsk, capitala Republicii Separatiste Donetsk. Da? Era băgat în coasta orașului Donetsk și era o poziție pe care ucrainenii, eroii ucraineni, desigur, o foloseau pentru a bombarda civilii din acest oraș. Da? Probabil știți că ultimul atac s-a petrecut acum 2 sau 3 săptămâni asupra unei piețe din oraș, duminică dimineață, deci atunci când oamenii se duc să-și facă cumpărăturile, și eu nu o să pot să îmi șterg niciodată de pe retină imaginea cu vânzătorul de mandarine întins lângă cutia de carton, da? Printre mandarinele risipite de lovituri. Ok.
Friends, Avdiivka is falling apart faster than my 2005 Jetta. You can patch it up as much as you want. It's just a matter of time before it ends up in the scrapyard. Alright, are you ready? Let's jump right in. As we're speaking, the battle is...
priviți-l cât de fericit este! Părăsește Avdiivka! Scapă cu viață! Ura! Bravo!
Nearly lost. Hundreds of Ukrainians are desperately trying to escape the encirclement by any means possible, but thousands are definitely trapped. Since my last video on Avdiivka, within a week, detachments of the Russian Guards and the Russian Volunteer Corps have made all these gains. They stormed all these tree lines, all the while pushing towards the citadel and the Avdiivka coke plant. As you can see in this video,
Avdiivka coke plant? Cum? Fabrica de coke? Zelensky mobilizează repede 500.000 de ucraineni să recupereze acest obiectiv foarte important pentru tine.
Russian troops planted the red banner at the exact spot where Zelensky took his selfie.
Așa ceva. Unde s-a dus Zelensky să facă TikTok? Da, și vedeți steagul ucrainean cum flutură glorios în vânt și au venit scârbile alea de... Așa și au pus steagul roșu cu seceră și ciocan. Da, steagul comunist, o să spună unii dintre voi mai slab de minte, nu. Ăla este pentru ruși steagul care semnifică victoria împotriva nazismului, da? Bun.
December.
Mai vreau să văd asta.
His selfie in
Una,
December.
două.
Facing encirclement. The Ukrainians had to abandon the Zenit stronghold just like we spoke about a couple days ago. To me, it's clear that the Russian intention is to take Zenit into a pincer. I will also tell you about the tragic story of the Ukrainian soldiers that defended Zenit until the end and that tried to break out through Russian lines. Thereafter, the Russians swiftly occupied the position and raised their banners over the former air defense base. The Russian troops are 800 meters away from cutting off the last exit route of the Ukrainian army. Do you understand how critical this situation is? It's only a matter of time before the Russian assault detachment storm the citadel. C'est fini, bro. What do you want me to tell you? Even the Washington Post has no other choice but to state the obvious. A full withdrawal from Avdiivka now seems likely. And now a reported 4,000 to 7,000 Ukrainian soldiers are essentially trapped, encircled by the Russian army, and who suffer from continuous artillery shelling night and day. You're witnessing one of Ukraine's worst military disasters because the generals of our beloved Ukrainskaya Armia too long to pull out their men out of the cauldron.
Madness and stupidity.
Here
Stupidity.
you can see a Ukrainian company anxiously listening to the explosions in Avdiivka, knowing they're the
ce
next wave
acolo?
to be sent into the meat grinder. The new commander-in-chief
Aoleu. Hai mă.
of the Ukrainian army, General Smiorc, has now decided to send more men into the cauldron. General, how many companies towards Avdiivka? Oh, you mean a couple battalions? In order to keep this gate of hell open and prevent this boiler from collapsing on itself.
Wow, cât de mișto este făcut clipul ăsta. Și eu sunt la prima vizionare.
The best way to describe what Ukrainian
O urmăresc în premieră împreună cu voi.
troops are currently facing is horror. That's how Smiorc took over the disastrous siege of Avdiivka and redeployed his elite 3rd Assault Brigade Azov right into the furnace. Here's what the speaker of the Azov friends and comrades. The sacrifice of the Azov Brigade allowed hundreds of small groups of Ukrainian soldiers to painfully retreat towards friendly lines across open fields.
Wow.
From this moment on, I only see two options. Number one, the 3rd Assault Brigade charge into the flanks to cover the retreat of the Avdiivka garrison, just like they did in Bakhmut, by expanding the perimeter in which the unit will withdraw. Number two, they will replace the shattered units that have been defending the city for months and gain time in order to allow the Ukrainian army to form a new line of defense at the rear. However, this would mean get encircled and fight to a last stand, just like they did in Mariupol. Although we all know who should intervene.
Dar nu au făcut chestia asta în Mariupol. Au rezistat o vreme în Azovstal până când s-au evacuat cu mânuțele sus și cu tatuajele pe ei, da, cu simboluri hinduse, cu vulturi și alte cele.
To save Avdiivka, that's right, the immediate counterattack of the 200 Airsoft Naval Twitter Brigade, supported by the 60...
Eu cred că comandantul brigăzii 200 Airsoft este Radu Hosu. Da, e și pe Twitter. Știți cum postează Radu Hosu pe Twitter? Ăsta nu știe engleză, din ce înțeleg, așa că el bagă textul pe care îl bagă oricum și pe Facebook în română, îl bagă într-un traducător de la automat. Și pe urmă îl dă în engleză și pe Twitter. A spus el și nici măcar nu verific. Ce iese, că de unde să verifice dacă nu știe? Că dacă nu știe, n-are cum să verifice. Bănuiesc, nu?
T9 desktop Reddit trolls.
Cel 69-lea, oare de ce o fi ales numărul ăsta? Desktop Reddit trolls. Alex, nu mai râde de vieții oamenii, că ei sunt plânși la ora asta, da? Li se scurg lacrimile în jos pe picioare și inundă vecinii. Și tu râzi de ei.
Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Russo.
Bun venit și pe canalul Noaptea Minții. Nu uitați de like, da? Nu uitați să vă abonați dacă nu sunteți abonați. Și mulțumiri speciale celor care mă susțin din postura de membri ai canalului Noaptea Minții și pe Patreon.
In war. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped. And welcome to the headquarters. How exactly did Ukraine end up in such a nightmare? Well, we know it. It's because they waited too long before organizing a proper withdrawal. For political reasons, they wanted to make it seem as if everything was fine when it wasn't.
Umblă vorba prin târg că i-au încercat să reziste în Avdiivka până după alegerile prezidențiale din Rusia. Deci, motive politice. Oamenii, asta e, cârniți!
Nobody likes an early pullout, but sometimes that's what's necessary to avoid long-term consequences. We know that the armored units of the 47th and 116th Mechanized Brigades already intervened to support the southern flank of Avdiivka. That should have been the waking call, but clearly nothing was done. After breaking through in Avdiivka proper from the north, the Russian command poured in reinforcements like this Russian fire team of 6 soldiers progressing towards the front. This group was intercepted by Ukrainian drone right here on the map, meaning, like many other reinforcements, it advanced along this road to reach the contact line. In the night of February 10th to the 11th, Russian troops took advantage of the fog covering Avdiivka and its surroundings to launch assault operations. That's how they successfully pushed out of Opitne, thus sealing the fate of the Zenit air defense base. In the north, they fully secured the railway crossing and established a solid bridgehead on the western side of it.
Da?
At that moment,
Străpungerea prin centrul orașului, o vedem.
advanced elements of the Russian army were only 200 meters
Da? Vedeți, și amenințau ruta asta de aprovizionare.
away from Ukraine's main supply road. It was now or never for Ukraine to withdraw its troops and not turn Avdiivka into Mariupol 2.0. With that being said, organizing a retreat is perhaps one of the most difficult military maneuvers to pull off, especially with all the depleted forces of the Avdiivka garrison and the 10th.
Și plus blindatele alea, cum ați văzut și pe ăla în poză, greu de extras prin nămoalele din Avdiivka, da?
Of February, General Alexander Tarnavsky, the commander of the Ukrainian grouping in Avdiivka, officially announced that reinforcements were on their way. On Telegram, he said, "We gave an adequate response to the actions of the enemy. We strengthened the blocking line, set up additional firing positions, and used fresh effective forces. Logistical delivery continues." Right. At that point, Tarnavsky had to coordinate 2 operations. Number 1, pull back the surviving units of the 110th Mechanized Brigade step by step from the exposed eastern part of the city. Consolidate the Ukrainian line in central Avdiivka until they can safely retreat out of the city. Number 2, reinforce the
Until they can safely retreat out prin nămoale!
points of the 110th Mechanized Brigade and try to push the much larger Russian force away from the garrison's last supply lines. I'm mainly talking about the 110th Mechanized Brigade, but there are also many other units defending the fortress. And it's not a surprise that on the 11th of February, Forbes reported Ukraine may have deployed one of its best brigades to try to save Avdiivka, namely General Zelensky's most trusted unit, the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov. Essentially, the plan was probably the same as what General Zelensky did in the Bakhmut meat grinder: counterattack with elite units on the flanks, widen the perimeter, and allow the garrison to withdraw. However, the difference is that in Bakhmut, the Ukrainians were only facing the Wagner Corps, which essentially had no aviation, very little artillery support, and almost no armored formations. And let's be honest, since then the Russians have also improved their tactical skills. Meanwhile, the former Wagnerians reorganized their assault units for their next push, as Russian aviation hammered the Citadel district with dozens of FAB-500 bombs. Literally entire commie blocks were control-alt-deleted.
Da? Blocuri comuniste, nu cami.
In this video, Ukrainian troops are hiding in the basements from Putin's symphony. On the 13th of February,
Sinfonia lui Putin. Doamne ferește.
the Ukrainian media reported that finally, after 2 years at the front, the 110th Mechanized Brigade was rotated out of the city. If you ask me personally, I press X for doubt. If that was true and they actually achieved that overnight, it means
X
there
for
were
doubt.
only 10 guys left in the brigade. Obviously, that's not what the spokesman of the brigade actually said.
Перше за 2 роки, майже 2 роки оборони Авдіївки з 110-ю окремою механізованою бригадою, деякі наші підрозділи нарешті вивели.
You heard it. He clearly said some units were withdrawn. How many is that? Historians will tell us. But according to the spokesman of the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov, the Russians are 7 times more numerous. We know that the Russians have 50,000 troops around Avdiivka, meaning at this moment there's still around 7,000 Ukrainian soldiers stuck in that cauldron. And on top of that, it was reported that this withdrawal had to be done at night, with all the lights of the vehicles turned off. One can wonder the price of a mile. To avoid the nightmare scenario of losing this road of life, elements of the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov arrived via the coke plant to counterattack, like this group aboard a Max Pro
s-au dus la la fabrica de coke ca să o salveze pentru Zelensky, nu ca să se retragă eroi. Cum așa ceva?
Firing at advancing Russian units.
Da, care? Că ăsta trăgea prin tufe, nu se vede nimic.
They were geolocated right here, and we can assume they were probably targeting the following Russian soldiers that infiltrated neighboring buildings right at the edge of the city. At the same time, the Avdiivka coke plant was also feeling the heat of the continuous shelling, as you can see in this video. This foreshadowed the claws of the Russian bear closing in on this infamous industrial area. These counterattacks by Azov came at a cost. That's how Captain Andrei Iskra was KIA on the 12th of February. What makes the task of Azov and this entire rescue operation so difficult is that the commanders of the 110th Mechanized Brigade, who stood there for 2 years, neglected to build any new backup fortifications towards the rear. Now that the Russians broke through the first line of defense,
Deci, am observat și pe clipul lui Dima de la Military Summary că ucrainenii se plângeau de această chestie, da? Că n-au fost construite fortificații în avans, undeva în spatele, în vestul orașului Avdiivka, ca să fie pregătite pozițiile pe care să se retragă soldații. Nu. Ei au așteptat tot pe soldați care scăpați. Care a scăpat din iadul de Avdiivka să pună mâna pe lopată și să sape tranșee pe acolo?
It's open bore. Despite the greatest efforts of Ukrainian units, the Russians captured this entire sector of Avdiivka. That was catastrophic for multiple reasons.
Catastrofal și genial. Da? Cine a coordonat acțiunile la Avdiivka este un geniu militar.
Russia now fully controlled the last paved road going into the city. Number 2, this means that the Avdiivka coke plant was now cut off from the rest of the city. Number 3,
a fost tăiată de Zelensky.
There would be little chance for the remaining Ukrainian defenders of Avdiivka to withdraw out of the cauldron with all their heavy equipment and armored vehicles.
Da. Deci trebuie să se retragă prin nămoale pentru că drumul asfaltat este un pic reținut de ruși și când te retragi prin nămoale nu prea poți să te retragi cu echipamentele, cu mașini de transport, cu blindate, cu tancuri. Asta e.
Important to mention that a Russian missile strike targeted a Ukrainian military base in Zelitovo on the 13th of February. Reportedly, 300 soldiers meant to rescue Avdiivka were KIA.
Okay.
What?
Doar 300? Eu știam 500 sau chiar mai mulți. Da?
A disaster.
Da, un dezastru. Gurile rele comentează că ar fi cumva o trădare, da? De undeva din partea ucraineană. Da? Că au avut rușii informația asta exactă despre o asemenea concentrare de forțe. Și au trimis Iskanderul și aia a fost. Da.
The Ukrainian defense of the city was holding on 4 key positions that for geographical reasons I nicknamed PAWG. P for the Avdiivka coke plant, A for the train station and the surrounding tree lines, W for the citadel, and G for the Zenit air defense base. Sector A is by far the most important to hold at all costs. If Sector A falls to the enemy, all hope is lost because it connects all defensive positions with one another.
Adică fix pe unde forțează rușii.
And it protects Ukraine's rear door. Then on Deep State UA map, you can see that there's actually another road going into Avdiivka. But let's be honest, this is a scam. In reality, there is no road. You just got to look at it from a satellite perspective. There are only dirt paths across fields. And because the weather was
sunt nămoalele alea pe care le-am văzut mai devreme în videoclipul ăla.
short, we have already entered the Rasputitsa season. I mean, look at this video. This pickup is fully stuck in the mud. It's literally drowning. That's why these 2 Ukrainian soldiers are complaining that the only way to reach Avdiivka now is by foot, and they have to carry all their ammunition with them. To make matters even worse, this exit route is under Russian fire control. It's only a matter of time before you have FPV drones swarming the entire sector, meaning that every Ukrainian unit that will attempt to break out from Avdiivka will literally play Russian roulette.
Da.
And the tragedy of all
Va
this is
juca nu cenzura rusă, cum traduce m-a disperat YouTube-ul, ci ruleta rusească. Ok.
that Ukraine is already facing a shortage of manpower. They cannot afford to waste more lives as they passed and the weather got warmer. All Ukrainian colonies managed
Haideți
to
să vă arăt ceva. Vedeți crucea asta albă, da? Am văzut recent videoclipul unui propagandist ucrainean care arăta o filmare din drona rușilor care lovea o camionetă care avea o cruce albă pe ea și spunea: priviți ruși cum atacă o ambulanță. Prietene, crucea albă nu este simbolul ambulanței, da? Crucea roșie. Crucea albă este altă mâncare de pește.
Fort Avdiivka came to a standstill. Meanwhile, on the 14th of February, according to some reports, the Ukrainian troops inside Avdiivka were getting ready for a breakout from the rapidly forming encirclement. Yet, no
Evaziune? Seriously? Evaziune? Evadare.
breakout order was given for the Ukrainians. But the Russians kept sending fresh reinforcements into the breach, like these fighters of the Sarmat battalion of the Triple D strong Donbass Wild Division, or in Russian, Dika Divizii Donbassa. Russian assault detachments stormed 500 meters in open terrain and got a foothold along this tree line. There was this video showing the aftermath of one of such firefights.
Ok.
Да. Семеро было. Сколько осталось? Все сдались.
You clearly see that the position was only defended by 7 soldiers. By the 15th of February, Russian stormtroopers expanded their positions across Sector A and cleared 1.6 kilometers of this tree line. They were now only 800 meters away from cutting off Avdiivka. Clearly, everything was falling apart, and this also meant that the positions previously held by the Azov Brigade have now since been lost to the enemy. From their current positions, it seems that the Russians will try to flank the Avdiivka coke plant. They could also push south to cut off any chance of retreat for the Avdiivka garrison, or they could also fight their way towards Lastochkine. Or another option.
Parcă văd că urmează propaganda să îngâne chestia asta. Oricum Avdiivka nu era important. Și o să o țină tot așa. Oricum Kievul nu era important. Oricum Ucraina nu era important.
Is that the Russians don't close off the encirclement.
Oricum Polonia nu... Nu. Glumă.
The good old Mongol tactics in order to draw all the Ukrainian defenders out in the open and annihilate them using their superior firepower, instead of forcing them into a last stand that could last for weeks and that would cost the lives of many Russian soldiers. On the southern part of the front, Russian forces advanced 500 meters north of the Zenit air defense base. The Russian maneuver was clear: take Zenit into a pincer. And at that point, they were only 700 meters away from achieving their objective. It's not a surprise what happened next. Logically, the Ukrainian command finally ordered all the troops out, and they abandoned the Zenit air defense base before being fully encircled. That's how men of the 1st Slavic Brigade raised their banners over the Ukrainian stronghold they have been facing for almost 10 years. This Ukrainian withdrawal was not as simple as it seems. 10 years. This Ukrainian withdrawal was...
E Zelensky ăsta? Seamănă. Chiar seamănă. Ia, uitați-vă și voi. Ciudat. Mă, evident că nu este el, da. Hei, ce ciudat.
Not as simple as it seems. Here's the story of Max Chervina, 110th Mechanized Brigade, 1st Battalion, 2nd Company. He witnessed the event firsthand. He said on an Instagram post that there were 2 breakout attempts. The first one on the night of February 14th. The first group of 10 men in his unit went out, but because of the artillery shelling, only 3 wounded made it back. 2 by themselves during the night, and the third one was evacuated later in the day by 4 volunteers, including our friend Max Charbina, who got himself injured during the rescue mission. The following night, on February 15th, it was now or never. All the squads of the company exited one by one. They had to cross 1 kilometer in open ground under heavy enemy shelling. All along the way, in the middle of the night, Max had to jump over his fallen comrades that were less lucky than him. Everyone escaped, except for the last group of 6 wounded soldiers left in the bunker. Max heard on the radio questions about when the medevac will be coming for them. The commander replied, "No one is coming, leave them behind." But the commander did not know that he was talking to these same wounded soldiers and thus sealing their fate. So that was the story of the breakout from the Zenit air defense base. Other reports mentioned that simultaneously Ukrainians also abandoned the water pumping station east of the city. I don't know about you, but the Battle of Avdiivka reminds me of the Kherson pocket that took place in January and February 1944. Soviet General Konyev's front encircled 50,000 men from multiple German lightning divisions like Viking, Valonian, Nakhva, and thousands of Russian auxiliaries. The 3rd Panzer Corps organized a relief mission to open a path in between Soviet divisions to allow the German troops inside the pocket to break out. The weaker German units were left behind as a rear guard, and roughly 30,000 men managed to escape back to friendly lines, but leaving all their heavy equipment behind. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of.
Mulțumesc frumos pentru vizionare!